In this video, we are going to discuss about HTTP response headers. So client makes a request to the server, or server will process that request and sends back the response. So basically the response consists of two parts, the response header here and the response body here. Okay, so response body is what you're expecting from when you make a request. For example, here we are making a request for a product of ID1. So you get back the response. And response header consists of all the meta information about the response here. For example, what is the content type, length, and when it is last modified, and all that stuff. Okay, so we are going to take a brief look at the response headers now. So this is how the entire response actually looks like. So what are HTTP response headers? So HTTP response headers provides metadata about the response returned by the server. So they provide information about like what is the status of the response, when the response was generated, when the response was last, when the resource was last modified, what is the content type, and what are the caching policies you use, etc. So these are the common response headers which are being used. Okay, content type, content length, date, cache control, your retry after, ETag. So we'll take a look at them one by one. The first one is the content type. So this indicates the media type of the response type. Okay, for example, here we are sending back the JSON response, so it indicates that the response which is generated here is of JSON type. In case of web application, the response will be in the content type may be an HTML type. So basically it helps the client to understand how to process the response. So there might be a client there which is going to process this JSON response. So content length. So this indicates the size of the response body in bytes. Okay, this may be required for an analytics purpose, or it may also help client to understand how much data to expect here. So here the content length is in terms of bytes here. So it indicates that this response which is generated here is of 284 bytes. So next is the date. So this indicates the date and time when this response was generated. So cache control. So it specifies the caching policies for the response. So basically it informs like how the client or proxy should cache this response. Okay, in this below example, the response is cached for 3600 seconds and it's publicly available. So ETag is server provides the unique identifier for the specific version of the resource. So ETag value is like hash of the resource. So client can send back the ETag in a conditional request along with if none match header to indicate if the resource has been modified or not. So here the server sends back the what is the hash value of the resource in the ETag value, and the client can send back the same thing in a conditional request along with this header to check if the resource which is there has been modified or not. So last modified indicates the date and time when this resource was last modified. This can help the client to decide whether to fetch the resource again or not. So location. So location response header is used in redirect and resource creation type resource. So it basically tells the client where to find the requested resource or the newly created one. So these are the below scenarios when the location header is used. For example, if the resource has moved permanently, okay, in 301, then that location header can indicate resource. The location header can indicate the what is the permanent URL. Similarly, if it is temporary moved, it can indicate what is the temporary moved, where the temporary resource has been moved. So when the resource has been created using a post request, so we can get a 201 created response. So the location can tell the client where to access the new resource. So server header specified information about the server, which is handling the request. This can include the software version, the operating system of the server here. So set cookie instruct the client to store a cookie. So cookie basically store the user specific information here. So cookies are stored on the client, and they're sent back in subsequent requests, so that so that you can maintain the session state authentication, or you can use that for tracking purpose or any for personalization like themes and etc. Now, access control allow origin is used in cross-origin resource sharing to specify which origins can access the resource. In the below example, all the origins can access the resource here. Content encoding indicates any compression which is applied to the response body. In the below example, it tells the client the response is compressed with gzip. Okay. Next is the retry after. So retry after response header indicates the client how to wait before retying the request. Maybe request. So client may have made the request too many times within a minute or so. So it's mainly used for rate limiting, and server maintenance. So when is retry after used? For example, for rate limiting, if there are too many requests, the client has exceeded that specific request, or when the server is down. Okay, so it can indicate after how many seconds you can just retry it. These are the two scenarios where the retry after a header is used by, by the server. So below are the use cases wherein we use this response headers. For example, for optimized caching, we can use the tags like cache control, ETag, and express headers to reduce the server load and improve the client side performance. You can using set cookie, you can ensure the security of the application, and you can support cross origin requests using access control allow origin header. And also you can provide helpful metadata information like what is the content type, what is the content uh, encoding being used, what is the size of the content, so that it helps the client to process the response efficiently.